Everyone talks about how to overcome objections. What nobody talks about though is how to pre-handle the objection in the prospect's mind before it even comes up. And that's exactly what we're going to be covering in this video. Now again, I know I say this a lot, but you guys are going to have the knowledge, but you won't have the implementation. So that's why on October 15th, I'm going to show you my exact step-by-step process on how I earned $30,000 in my first month selling anything. So if you guys want that, the link is in the description below. Enjoy the rest of the video. Okay, so step number one, how to pre-handle objections. Number one, you have to realize that you have to overcome their concern in their mind of what's going to be coming up in the future. Now, it's a very nuanced thing when you say it that way, but the easy way to understand what's going to be coming up in the future is by this 4-step sequence that I always do. So number one, I always ask them, hey man, like what have you invested in the past in terms of sales training? Let's use sales training for an example today. And they'll be like, oh, I haven't really done anything, right? Or even if they say, hey, I've done anything, there's 2 different ways. We're going to cover those. But let's go with the first one. They didn't do anything. Be like, okay, man, what prevented you? Now, listen again. What prevented you is one of the most important parts. You need to ask this question to get the real concern. Because what they're going to tell you is what prevented them in the past. Why is this important though? Because past experiences lead to beliefs. Now, what do I mean by that? For example, as a kid, you didn't like McDonald's because you got food poisoning. You will not like McDonald's as an adult because that experience has built a belief in your mind which will not want you to do that thing again. So when we ask them what's prevented them, they're going to tell us what prevented them in the past, and this is going to allow us to understand the objection that's going to come up in the future. So, for example, let's say they say, I didn't have the money. This is where you want to overcome their concern. This is my process to do so. The first thing I'll say is be like, yeah, no problem at all, man. It just depends what way were you viewing the money. Because most of our successful clients, they don't view money as a problem. They view it as like a symptom. Because once you have the skills, what would you have more of? And they'll be like, oh, money for sure. Yeah, right? And you prioritizing the money, like rather than the skills, where has that led you in your life? And now they're going to understand the consequences of them prioritizing the money rather than the skills. And here's the next question, where you get them to understand where that belief is going to take them. If you continue to prioritize the money rather than the skills, what's going to continue to happen? Well, I'm going to stay where I'm at. Now, everyone thinks it's a good answer. That's not a good answer. You have to get the visualization of what happens when they stay where they're at. Which means what for you though? Well, it means I can't do X, Y, and Z for my family. That's the answer we're looking for. We're not looking for I stay where I'm at. This is one of the most important parts, is where you challenge their way of thinking. So the next question you want to ask is, are you willing to settle for that though? And they'll be like, no, no, no. But this is where you need to get them to clarify why not. Why not though? They'll be like, oh, I can't because I need to do X, Y, and Z for my family. So why now are you going to overcome this way of thinking? This is how we ask the why now question. Why now are you going to overcome this way of thinking? Because now, what are we doing at the end of the conversation? We're pre-handling the concern so it can't even come up at the end. Now, let me use another example. Let's say they were fearful. It's going to be the exact same process, but we're just going to add different wording. So let me show you exactly how we do it. And I appreciate you for sharing that, man, that you were a little bit uncertain. I guess, could I share a different perspective with you? And they'll be like, yeah, sure. That way of thinking where you let that uncertainty overcome you, like, where has that led you in your life, man, the past 3 years? Well, it's led me to where I am here today, which is where exactly? Oh, where I can't do X, Y, and Z for my family. So I guess what's going to continue to happen if you keep letting this level of uncertainty overcome you rather than you overcoming it or staying in the same place? Are you willing to settle for that? No. Why not though? And then they're going to clarify again why they're not going to willing to settle for that. And again, you're going to say, why now are you going to overcome this way of thinking to get them to not give you that objection in the end? I hope you guys are keeping up here because it's really important stuff. So now you're pre-handling all their objections in their mind so they can't give you the real concern. The main thing that you guys are going to run into is that sometimes they won't actually give you the real concern when you ask them what's prevented them. And you have to get to the real concern. Because a lot of people believe the first thing they say, but 99% of the time, the first thing they say isn't the real objection. Let me give you an example. If they say, yeah, I just didn't have the time to do training. Is that the real objection? No, the real objection is money and fear. So we have to get to the real objection. If they say, oh, I didn't even know there was training out there. Is that the real objection, or is there something behind that? These are the patterns that we have to understand. Now, I want to go back to something we spoke about earlier, which is, what if they tried something in the past? What are we going to do there? This is very important. We want to frame them. This is how you frame them, guys. It's going to be one of the most important parts. They say, yeah, I tried XYZ program in the past. How did that go for you, man? There's 2 ways this can go. They can have a good experience or a bad experience. There's going to be where they get a concern if they have a bad experience. So let me show you what to do if they have a bad experience. They'll say, yeah, I know XYZ company didn't deliver the results they promised they were going to give. We're like, okay, man, well, I appreciate you for sharing, and I appreciate you for even being on the call today, looking to overcome this concern. Because you'd be surprised how many people have one bad experience and let that overcome them. And we're like, oh yeah. I'm like, what typically happens to those people who let that experience overcome them? We're identity framing him to be a person who doesn't let that experience overcome them. The next step, where do those people typically end up? So you realize is what happens to those people. And then the last part is, why is it so important for you not to be like one of them? So they understand why they do not want to be a person who lets that experience overcome them. And if you want to, is what I typically do, is I also add the other frames. I'll be like, would it be a crazy thing for me to say, man, and I want to hold you accountable for a second, that you actually have let that way of thinking overcome you for like the past 2 years because you haven't reinvested in anything? And they'll be like, no, it's not a crazy thing to say. Okay, but you letting that overcome you, like, where has that led you in the past 2 years, man? Oh, to where I am here today. What's going to continue to happen? And then we follow our process. You see? So we're identity framing them to be a person who doesn't let that experience overcome them, but then also getting them to understand the consequences of what happens if they continue to let that way of thinking overcome them. That is my step-by-step process on how to pre-handle objections. I'm going to break this down live in a more nuanced version because there's a lot of things that you guys need to understand about this on October 15th. So make sure you're there so we can break this all down for you live and actually call review your calls that you guys have and show you exactly what you did wrong when you try to overcome the objection in the beginning. So make sure you guys register for that below.